Epstein, 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 Epstein. New York City, Upper East Side, 1989. There is a house on East 71st Street in Manhattan. It is the largest one in the entire city, spanning 7 floors, with a grand staircase, marble everything, and enough rooms to lose yourself in for days. The man who moved into that house in 1989 was Jeffrey Epstein, and that house was never exactly bought. It was transferred by one of the wealthiest men in Ohio, for reasons that would stay buried for the next 2 decades. This is the story of Epstein's money, where it came from, how it moved, and who made it possible. Columbus, Ohio, 1986. Leslie Wexner had built something extraordinary. Starting from a single clothing store in Columbus, he had turned a retail idea into an empire. The Limited, Lane Bryant, Victoria's Secret, all under one roof. By the mid-1980s, Forbes had him listed among the richest men in America. But Wexner had a problem. His personal finances were a mess. He had enormous wealth spread across dozens of accounts, trusts, and properties, and no single person he fully trusted to manage it all. Then someone introduced him to Jeffrey Epstein. Before that meeting happened, Wexner's own longtime financial advisor, a man named Harold Levin, sat across from Epstein and came away with a clear feeling. He told Wexner directly, "I smell a rat. I don't trust him." Wexner ignored it. Then he fired Levin and put Epstein in his place. Columbus, Ohio, July 1991. Within a few years, Epstein had sorted out Wexner's entangled finances. Wexner described him as someone with excellent judgment and unusually high standards. He called him a most loyal friend. In July 1991, Wexner signed a document that almost nobody in the financial world hands over to another person: a full power of attorney, meaning Epstein could now sign checks on Wexner's behalf, hire staff, borrow money, buy and sell property, and file tax returns, all while using Wexner's name and Wexner's money. The document exists in the public record, and it gave one man nearly unlimited access to one of the largest private fortunes in the United States. Over the following years, properties began changing hands. A house in New Albany, Ohio, built on land next to Wexner's estate, a Paris apartment, a ranch in New Mexico, 2 private islands in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and that townhouse on East 71st Street in Manhattan. Epstein's empire did not come out of nowhere. It came out of a single relationship. New York City and U.S. Virgin Islands, mid-1990s. If you asked anyone in elite financial circles who Jeffrey Epstein's clients were, the answer was always vague. He said he only worked with individuals worth more than $1 billion. He never named names. He kept no public profile. But none of that mattered, because Leslie Wexner had hired him. And in a world where credibility is everything, that single fact opened every door. Epstein leveraged the association relentlessly. He became a trustee of the Wexner Foundation. He appeared at philanthropic events. He cultivated relationships with politicians, scientists, royalty, and billionaires, all of whom assumed that if Wexner trusted this man with his fortune, there had to be something real behind it. In 1996, Epstein relocated his firm to the U.S. Virgin Islands. The territory offered extraordinary tax incentives, and records later confirmed that his companies paid an effective tax rate of around 4% over roughly 20 years, saving an estimated $300 million that would otherwise have gone to the federal government. 1999 to 2018. According to a financial analysis published by Forbes and later cited in Senate investigations, Epstein's 2 main companies, Financial Trust Company and Southern Trust Company, took in more than $800 million over roughly 2 decades. About $490 million of that was in fees, direct payments from clients for services rendered. The publicly confirmed client list? 2 people. Leslie Wexner, who paid approximately $200 million, and Leon Black, the billionaire co-founder of Apollo Global Management, who paid between $158 and $170 million. That is nearly the entire fee revenue of an alleged global wealth management operation. Two clients, both billionaires, both paying sums that are extraordinary by any professional standard. The remaining $310 million was recorded as investment returns. The sources of those returns have never been fully accounted for in any public proceeding. J.P. Morgan Chase, private banking, early 2000s. For over a decade, Epstein held accounts at J.P. Morgan Chase. His holdings there reportedly exceeded $200 million at their peak, generating substantial revenue for the bank's private banking division. Inside J.P. Morgan, there was a man named Jess Staley. Staley was the head of investment banking. He was also Epstein's strongest internal advocate. When colleagues raised concerns about the relationship, Staley pushed back. When the bank's general counsel, Stephen Cutler, sent an internal message describing Epstein as someone who is not an honorable person in any way and who should not be a client, the warning was absorbed without consequence. June 2008. Epstein pleads guilty in Florida to illicit activities involving minors. He is now a convicted felon. J.P. Morgan keeps his accounts open anyway. The bank does not cut ties until 2013, 5 years after the conviction. Epstein then moves his business to Deutsche Bank, where he remains until 2018. A Senate investigation later found that a major financial institution waited 7 years to report suspicious transactions involving Epstein to the Treasury Department, a potential violation of the Bank Secrecy Act. Senator Ron Wyden stated before Congress that one of Epstein's accounts alone contained a record of 4.725 wire transfers, totaling $1.1 billion. The bank processed the money, filed the paperwork late, and settled related lawsuits without admitting wrongdoing. Palm Beach, Florida, August 2006. Federal investigators opened a formal case against Epstein. The timing of what happened next is worth noting carefully. 1 month after that investigation began, Epstein moved $57 million into a high-risk Bear Stearns hedge fund. SEC filings show his financial trust company held a 10% voting stake in the fund. Because the fund carried a leverage ratio of 17-1, withdrawing that $57 million would have been equivalent to pulling roughly $1 billion from its total structure. Bear Stearns collapsed in March 2008. Its failure helped set off the broader financial crisis. Then, in 2007, Wexner announced that he had discovered Epstein had been misappropriating money from his personal fortune. He fired him, revoked the power of attorney, removed Epstein's name from his bank accounts. But here is the detail that tends to get overlooked. According to documents released as part of the federal investigation, Wexner's attorneys informed investigators in 2008 that Epstein had repaid $100 million to Wexner, returned quietly. No criminal complaint publicly confirmed. No prosecution of Epstein for the misappropriation itself. When someone returns $100 million to you and you respond without pressing charges, what does that arrangement actually look like? In 2008, Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty. He served roughly 13 months, much of it on work release. Starting in 2012, Leon Black began making payments to Epstein for financial consulting. Those payments continued through 2017. The total, confirmed by an independent review commissioned by Apollo Global Management, came to at least $158 million. Senate investigators later put the figure at $170 million. Black's relationship with Epstein dated back to the 1990s. It did not end when Epstein became a registered sex offender. In a settlement reached with the U.S. Virgin Islands and made public in 2023, Black agreed to pay $62 million. In exchange, he received immunity from criminal prosecution in that territory. The settlement language, according to Senator Wyden, acknowledged that Epstein used Black's payments to help fund operations in the Virgin Islands. New Albany, Ohio, February 18, 2026. The pressure to release Epstein-related documents had become impossible to resist. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The Justice Department began releasing materials. 5 members of the House Oversight Committee traveled to New Albany, Ohio, to depose Leslie Wexner, then 88 years old, in a closed session at his home. He described Epstein as a world-class con man. He said he was duped. He denied any knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities. When asked how Epstein obtained hundreds of millions of dollars from him, congressional investigators reported that Wexner said he could not remember. Representative Robert Garcia said afterward that investigators had identified more than $1 billion that was either transferred, provided in stocks, or given directly by Wexner to Epstein, and that Wexner appeared to be unaware of much of it. Representative Stephen Lynch was more direct. "There is no question in my mind," he told reporters, given the evidence so far, that Les Wexner knew about this and failed to stop it. Wexner has never been charged with any crime. Bermuda and U.S. Virgin Islands. Here is how the structure worked, as far as investigators have been able to reconstruct it. Epstein chaired a company called Liquid Funding Limited, registered in Bermuda and partially owned by Bear Stearns. It traded in complex mortgage-backed securities, the exact financial instruments that received inflated credit ratings before the 2008 collapse. The company's directors later told investigators they had never met Epstein. There were no board meetings. The directorship duties were, in their words, pro forma. Offshore shell companies registered in secrecy-friendly jurisdictions, accounts across multiple continents, a tax rate of 4% on hundreds of millions in income, a paper trail constructed to absorb scrutiny and give back nothing. And at the center of it all, a man who spent decades presenting himself as a brilliant, discreet financial manager to the ultra-wealthy, whose entire reputation rested on the trust of a single billionaire. Epstein's offices were full of documents. His accounts held decades of transaction history. His associates are still alive. And the question that no one has yet resolved is ultimately a simple one. Who exactly was this money for?